To say Israel has the right to self-defense is like saying Captain Cook, when he planted the British flag in the Aboriginal nations of what would later become Australia, was somehow self-defense of Britain. We are not living in a situation where Israel can be defined as defending itself. It controls what goes in and comes out of Gaza. It controls the electricity in Gaza. It controls the seas of Gaza. It controls the skies of Gaza. This is not about self-defense, and it never was. You are gaslighting the entire world, and we have had enough. This is not a battle between two equal sides. This is colonialism, settler colonialism in full effect. When you look at a place like Gaza, you are talking about 14 years of some of the most comprehensive sanctions that have ever existed in human history. Fascistic language like putting them on a diet or mowing the lawn has been used about them. 98% of the water is unfit for human consumption. When you look at the difference between a nuclear-armed, technologically advanced army armed by all of the great powers, F-16s which are built by BAE Systems that bomb schools, to people where somehow they find a way to resist their situation, there is zero parity in this context. Numerous UN resolutions have affirmed again and again that Palestinians have the right to armed resistance to liberate themselves from subjugation. It is not the position of those sitting on armchairs in Britain to pontificate about the types of weaponry that resistance use to defend themselves when their very system is converged, wrapped up and entwined in the military killing machine which is targeting those people. So who are these combatants that Israel needs to defend itself from? A disabled man with his pregnant wife and their 3-year-old child who died in an airstrike in a Shartet refugee camp. 7 children were killed with their mothers by an Israeli airstrike. 11 of the children that were killed were already receiving treatment for traumas that they had suffered in the wars of 2008, 2009 and 2014. There are examples of families swapping children to spread the burden and the possibility that maybe some of their children might survive. The Israeli occupation forces have the registers of every single home in Gaza. The fact that they are able to call individual telephones and warn of strikes mean that for every single decision made to hit a home that leads to the death of children, women and civilians, that the Israeli occupation forces knew.
You see all of the kids around me? They're just kids. Why wouldn't you just send a missile to them and kill them? It's not fair.
The right of children to live is what we are talking about here. The right of children to live. They've bombed the Palestinian Children Relief Fund's offices, cafes, bookshops, media towers, schools, but also health facilities. 22 separate health facilities have been significantly damaged, including the only COVID lab in Gaza. Several doctors killed in their homes, doctors who were working on treating an already battered population in the middle of a pandemic. It's clear that there is no parity of arms, but even if there wasn't, there's no parity of power. One side is the occupier, the other side is the occupied. One side has racist laws, the other side is subject to those racist laws. One side is able to control the freedom of movement, the other side has their freedom of movement controlled. One side is the killer and the other side is the killed. There is no equality of arms in this equation. It's a key understanding at the United Nations that decolonization is a positive thing and is the reason for most of the states of the world having independence. How is it possible that we seem to be more concerned about defending the right of a colonial, settler, ethnic cleansing entity to continue business as usual, which is besieging and ethnic cleansing, than we are bothered by the fact that colonialism still exists in 2021.
The closer you are, the less you see. Colonial America to the Indians. There's the attitude of America to the blacks. How could you have done that? Didn't you see? The way that my people are settling Judah and Samaria is unfortunately coming at the expense of the Palestinian people.
When you look at figures like Theodor Herzl, credited as the founder of the Zionist movement, their conception was very much a colonial project in the mirror image of European colonialism. There are 440 Israeli colonies in the West Bank, housing over 500,000 illegal settlers who are armed and have control over 80% of the water in the West Bank. There are 565 checkpoints where soldiers act with nothing but unaccountable impunity. Those settlements are deemed illegal by UN Resolution 2334. Who funds those settlements and where does the money come from? Well, Roman Abramovich, prior to receiving citizenship from Israel, moved $100 million from the British Virgin Islands to Elad, which is hell-bent on ethnically cleansing Sheikh Jarrah and has successfully ethnically cleansed many parts of Jerusalem. Who else funds Elad? The Clermont Family Foundation. It has funded the Center for Security Policy, led by Frank Gaffney, an organization which is also funded by Raytheon and Lockheed Martin. The Center for Security Policy gave the foundational work to Donald Trump for the Muslim ban. The Clermont Family Foundation also funded Middle East Forum, led by former employee of the Israeli Ministry of Defense, Greg Roman. Middle East Forum funded the Free Tommy Robinson campaign, and as a think tank were quoted 13 times by Anders Breivik following his massacre of over 70 people in Norway. Another organization that funds Elad is the Hertog Foundation. They also funded the David Horowitz Freedom Center, which employed both Katie Hopkins,
big round of applause for Israel. Yes, come on Israel.
And Tommy Robinson.
Palestine. Why would you support Palestine?
The Hertog Foundation funds the Friends of the IDF and Middle East Forum. The Friends of the IDF had on their board Robert Shillman. Robert Shillman also funded Tommy Robinson. What we see here is an intertwining of interests between Zionist actors around the world who believe that their interests are served by not only funding violent settlement in the West Bank and a war against indigenous Palestinian people, but also pushing domestic Islamophobia within Britain and the United States.
They are taking over our country. We're going to be under their rules, their laws. We have had enough. Free Tommy.
Today we see raw fascism within the Green Line.
Everything is the Jews, not a single piece for other people, only for us. And we won't give anybody else, just for us.
We see Palestinian homes having red X's marked on them by settlers to be revisited later and targeted. There is over 50 different laws within the state of Israel that enshrine inequality between Palestinian citizens of Israel and Jewish Israelis. We see Palestinians being lynched. But what could have more adequately articulated the inhumanity and the racism than seeing young Zionist men in Jerusalem dancing and celebrating while seeing a fire stemming from the courtyard of Al-Aqsa Mosque. This fascism was foretold by Albert Einstein and others. If he was able to be clear about the fascism ahead, why is it today our freedom of speech is withheld from us? Between 2016 and 2018, 500 Palestinians were arrested for posts that they made on the internet, including children. How hideous is it for those well-paid, well-fed members of the British Commentariat who have complained for so long about cancel culture to pontificate about their own rights of freedom of speech, while Palestinian children and even children in this country who advocate for the Palestinian cause do not have that freedom of speech.
Babies and children are getting killed for no reason at all in Palestine.
You've got your racist views, take them somewhere else because they're not welcome here.
You have a sophisticated campaign to depict the victim as the aggressor and the aggressor as the victim. The Zionist project has necessitated a level of censorship, not only in Britain, but in Palestine and in other places around the world. Over 250 Jewish employees of Google have come out and called for anti-Zionist speech to be protected. This is where the change will come from. Not the managerial classes, not the billionaire classes. The change will come from the workers. It will come from the dock workers in Naples who have refused to put those weapons onto ships. It will come from fire brigade workers refusing to take down Palestinian activists, shutting down Elbit systems. It will come from us heeding the call of Palestinian civil society, a unified Palestine that says we will go on strike, we will be ungovernable, so we must too be ungovernable. And what about the unions? We have numerous unions in this country who passed the motion of BDS in 2010. Why is that policy not being implemented today? The musicians union in this country claims to be the first ever organized trade grouping which banned its members from going and performing in South Africa. Where is that spirit? Not only do BAE Systems, with workers who are members of unions in this country, make the components for the F-16, for the F-35, BAE Systems also are complicit and part of the building of the naval drones which buttress the siege in Gaza. No more complicity, no more cooperation, and no more collaboration with apartheid and settler colonialism in Palestine. Tell your MP if he received money from Trevor Chin, if she received money from the Conservative Friends of Israel, if she's like Priti Patel and went on secret meetings without the knowledge of the British government, 13 secret meetings with Israeli government figures. She may have been organizing for public British money, your taxes, to be directed towards more settler colonialism. Tell them no. Hold them accountable. The buck stops here. This is where it ends.
Me and my brothers are scared for each other, so we always try to be together, because if we die together, that will be the best thing, because we can still see each other when we go to heaven.
People say to the Palestinians, where's your Nelson Mandela? Where's your Gandhi? Nelson Mandela made clear,
it is no use for Israel to talk of peace if they still hold on Arab territories which they conquered during the Six-Day War in 1967.
And Gandhi opposed Zionism. There is a myriad of people across the last 50 to 60 years who have spoken out bravely against racist discrimination and structural racism, who were absolutely clear. The Palestinians are on the right side of history. We exist at a time over the last 5 years where the elite narrative has been permanently discredited. Whether it is through the Black Lives Matter mobilizations, the Extinction Rebellion mobilizations, we are seeing a clear gap between those that decide policy and decide news and the representation of that policy, and those that are affected by that policy. We must link together all of these things, as Black Lives Matter bravely did, standing with the Palestinians. It is that type of solidarity which we must build across the world. Even after the ceasefire, don't look away. There is a unified national uprising happening, and it is our job to make that uprising international. Think about the poetic justice. Roman Abramovich, the owner of Chelsea, funding Zionist settlers. Chelsea defeated in the FA Cup final. Leicester City players celebrate on the pitch holding the Palestinian flag. Manchester United players walking down the pitch holding the Palestinian flag. People are naturally empathetic, and when they see the spectacular forms of violence that have been displayed over the last few days, it is expected that they would respond the ways they have. Well, let's remember that the continuous Nakba is full of slow and less spectacular violence. Do not look away now. Continue to organize, to educate, to learn, and to demand. We can't expect from the mainstream media real, serious coverage that is free from the manipulation of powerful actors. That's why we want you to join Double Down News now on the Patreon and make this happen. Join the future of journalism. Join Double Down News on Patreon.